Good evening, everyone. My name is Jeremy Newman. I'm the Policy Director for THSC, and James thought I didn't need an introduction, so we just wanted to let him eat. So I decided to introduce myself. But I wanted to spend a little bit of time explaining to you guys some of the progress that THSC and homeschoolers and Texas families have made this year, because we brought this message to all of you guys this year to persevere through the fights that we have and towards the goals that we're looking for, and we want to give you guys encouragement that progress is being made. And if you look back over the last 30 years, THSC has been around for about 30 years defending Texas families. But families have been fighting this fight since the very beginning. And I think that one of the reasons for that is that we maintain hope for a better future. And that hope is one of the things that motivates us. So in Texas, we have battles for freedom for families and for children and for parents, just like we do all over the rest of the country. In fact, our friends from Texas Right to Life are here somewhere, I think. There was a bill that we worked on with them this session to prevent doctors from making decisions to let a patient die, a child die, over the objections of that patient's family. And a lot of people didn't even know that that was legal in Texas. And the Charlie Gard situation in Europe kind of brought a highlight to that. And I talked to a lot of people in Texas who, when I told them that that was legal, literally did not believe me that that was legal, because they didn't think it was possible for someone to actually allow that to happen in Texas, of all places. There are countless illustrations from that, but I really want to pull three specific things that happened during the legislative session out for you guys to highlight. CPS issues were the big issue that THSC took up this session, because we started to see the serial abuse that was happening to families inside the CPS system, and homeschoolers in particular have historically been a target of that problem. And a lot of times when CPS gets involved with a family, when they figure out that that family is a homeschool family, that becomes an easy issue for them to pick on. And THSC had a family that we started helping in 2013, that case actually just wrapped up at the beginning of this year, where they were literally taken to court and had their kids removed because they homeschooled their kids. And the argument at the first hearing was they had no state-approved curriculum. If you're a homeschooler in Texas, you know there is no such thing as a state-approved homeschooling curriculum. So issues like that motivated us to get involved in that issue during the legislative session. We were actually a little bit overambitious, if I'm going to be completely honest with you. We had about 18 issues that we decided to take up this session, because CPS was everyone's focus, and so we knew that this was to some degree a make it or break it opportunity to pass a lot of significant reforms. And one of the first ones that we worked on that was actually an issue in that case that I just mentioned to you is the deadlines for CPS cases. Because some of you guys might know there is a statutory deadline, and has been for years, in CPS cases that says that they have to resolve the case within 12 months or within 18 months if they're allowed a 6-month extension. Well, this case that I mentioned to you was resolved early this year at the 3.5-year mark. The reason for that deadline is to protect families and to protect the children, because they don't have the resources to battle the state in this type of lawsuit. And Senator Brian Hughes, sitting right here, was actually the one who championed that for us and got that passed in the Senate. And James Frank actually worked on it when it came over to the House as well. And so we were able to reinforce that deadline with actual teeth in it to just remove the jurisdiction from the court if they decide that they're going to bypass that deadline. And when we originally filed that, CPS came to us and said, no, don't do this. And we asked them why, and they said, well, so many of our cases go past the deadline that it would mess up our scheduling in order for you to make this change. And so my thought was, so you're saying don't enforce the law because we don't follow the law already. And so that was one of the major issues that we were able to get addressed this session with the help of some of our advocates in the legislature and the families around the state who put in the time to come and lobby the legislature and to call their representatives and senators. And one of the second issue I'll mention is directly related to homeschooling. I mentioned in that case, homeschooling was one of the reasons that they cited to remove those children. And so we were able to pass legislation this year as well that prevents the state from using homeschooling as a reason for an investigation or removal of those children. And that's historic. To my knowledge, no other state has ever been able to do that, but it's been a problem in every state. And the third one I want to mention isn't actually something that we passed. It was something that we worked with families around the state to kill. And this is to underscore the fact that this fight is a continuing fight, something that we have to defend against every session. To my knowledge, this bill that I'm about to explain was the worst CPS bill we have ever dealt with in the legislature. And it was a bill by Representative Cindy Burkett, and yeah, I'm naming names. And among other things, what the bill said was that if CPS decides to place you in the category of being at risk for future abuse or future neglect, then they get to come visit your house every month to figure out if you're abusive or neglectful. Now, to be clear, these are not people who have done anything wrong up to this point. And the bill literally lists as one of the reasons that you can come visit these families because they're low-income families, people who are at risk of future abuse or neglect. So we fought that bill in the state legislature on the House side, and it got to the House floor, and they hadn't made the changes that we needed made. And so we reached out to the homeschooling community and got phone calls sent in there. And Representative Dustin Burrows isn't here tonight, but he's the one that carried the amendment to fix that bill. And then Senator Lois Kolkhorst, who isn't here, defended it on the Senate side when they tried to get it put back in after that. So this was a group effort by a lot of people to address these issues. And to kind of tie this in more directly to the idea of perseverance as we see it, I mentioned before, Texas families have been in this fight from the very beginning, and one of the motivating factors that they've had is that they maintain hope for a better future. And I suspect if I asked everyone here tonight that every hand would go up at the question of who hopes for a better future. And if you look at the book of Hebrews, one of the things it says is that faith is the substance of your hope. And in the book of James, it says that faith without works is dead. So what does that mean? That means that you cannot ever see your hope realized without faith. But you have to have action to back up your faith. So the idea of perseverance is that there is a goal that we believe in, not just something that we hope exists, something we have faith exists, and that is something that we are pursuing constantly. And so we maintain faith that the final victory that God has given to us, that he's promised us, is something that will be realized. And so we have to endure all of the trials, and we have to go past all of the victories, even going past all of the victories, looking to the final victory that God has given us and persevering constantly towards that goal. In fact, there's a quote that I want to read to you guys that I think really captures this, in my opinion. If you've ever seen THSC's annual ministry report, you'll probably have seen this at the end of it. It says, THSC has never been a short-term project. Our past is scarred by lengthy legal battles. Our future is plotted like a voyage to a new world. We view our work for homeschool and parental rights with the same steadfast determination as the hymn writer who wrote, "Let us hope and trust, let us watch and pray, and labor until the Master comes." So my point to you guys today is that God has called us to be in the fight and to stay in the fight. And what that means is that we don't get an excuse to step out of the fight because something went well or because something didn't go well. The point is to stay in the fight. And so I want to recognize some of the legislators who are here tonight who helped us especially towards that goal. And there are a few of them, several who weren't able to make it. And the first one is Representative Mike Schofield. You able to come up here? So Representative Schofield, we came to him somewhat late in the session, actually, with a bill that Senator Kolkhorst had passed, Senate Bill 738, and the problem that it was addressing was that in a lot of areas around the state, CPS was filing multiple suits against the same family, one suit for each child, and they were going to different courts. So the family is now defending against 2 or 3 CPS cases in different courts over the same allegations, defending the same facts, and getting different decisions from different judges. So we brought that issue to him late in the session. He took that up, actually passed it as an amendment on the floor first, I believe, and then got the bill passed after that as well. And I want to underscore that we could not do this work if it weren't for the advocates in the legislature who are willing to respond when we ask them for this help. So I just want to publicly recognize Representative Schofield for that work.
I'd just like to say one thing. First of all, I want to thank you and thank Tim for the work that you do. It is really hard during a session when a million things are flying past you to keep track of everything. And if it wasn't for your advocacy and being there and catching some of the things that were going on, there are a lot of things that would slip by that we would never notice. And thank you for putting us on the right track. I also want to ask you a question. How many of you thought that James Frank looked pretty good presiding over a large room from a podium at the front? Just saying.
For those of you who are not political, you'll get that joke later. All right, so the next person I want to ask up is actually Senator Hughes, who's sitting right here. So Senator Hughes, he ran the gauntlet for us this session. We came to him with a long list. I mentioned 18 things. Well, all 18 of them were in the bill that we asked him to take up. And he took that up for us. And actually, I don't think Drew Tedford is here, but if Drew Tedford was Senator Hughes' legislative director, that guy needs a raise. He did such a great job during the session keeping track of all of that stuff. And Senator Hughes did the same thing for us last session, actually, on the deadlines issue, the same issue that he passed as an amendment on the House floor and was procedurally, it got stripped off after that. And so he came back with that same issue this past session and a lot of other ones packed into that same bill. And we've dealt with people before who will take up a bill and then they don't work on it because putting their name on the bill is the political capital that they need. We didn't run into that problem. And Senator Hughes took the issues that he wasn't sure were going to get passed on the bill and he amended them onto other bills to make sure that they got through. And so the deadline issue is one of the several issues that he worked with us on this session, but I really just wanted to highlight that and thank you for that. I appreciate it. All right, and the last one, Representative James Frank.
Because I hadn't been up here enough?
Yeah, he hasn't been up here enough, he says. So, Representative Frank mentioned that he's on THSC's board, he's a homeschool dad. One of the things that means he brings to the table is some perspective. And so when we go into his office, I never have to convince his staff that the idea we're talking about should be a common sense idea. It's something that they just intuitively understand. And CPS issues were actually something that were a priority for them this session, and not even just from a parental rights perspective, but from a statewide perspective. Representative Frank was the one who carried the major CPS reform bill through the House and ended up passing that. But he didn't lose sight of the fact that among those priorities were the issues important to parents and children and families. And so he made that a priority, and he filed some of that legislation for us. And like a lot of other bills, when he realized that that bill wasn't going to make it through committee, he took the most important issues and he amended them onto the priority bill that he already had on the House floor. And this is something that has been consistent with Representative Frank's office, that we can come to him every session if there's a problem, and he will respond every session when there's a problem. And so we just want to publicly thank you for that and also present you with that.
All right, very good.